janu tam ta ta ka janu tam ta ta ka janu tam. Dinna, kitaka dinna, din, tataka dinna, kitaka dinna, din, tataka dinna, kitaka dinna, din, tataka dinna.
Hello, everybody. Hope everybody can hear me and see me. We're really excited to be back here for our Broken Raga Massive workshop series. We've been doing 2 workshops a week since the beginning of the quarantine. No, you're not hearing me right now? Yeah. Cool. Okay. So, as I was saying, we've been doing 2 workshops a week since the beginning of the quarantine. And we've been covering a wide variety of topics. And each week, every Thursday, we're dedicating Thursdays to um, uh, more of a series of workshops. And, Samart Nagakar did one on the different gharanas. Abhik Mukherjee spoke about different styles of composition in Hindustani music. And we're really excited to begin this workshop series with Bala Skandan, a fantastic percussionist, mridangist, teacher, performer based right here in New York City. He's been around for quite a long time. So first, welcome, Bala. Nice to have you.
Thank you, Aaron. Nice to be here.
Um, yeah, and it's going to be really great to kind of get into kind of the nuts and bolts and the roots of what makes up Carnatic rhythm. I know it can be a very deep dive, and there's a lot to cover in a way. And we're hoping that in this series you can help us understand all the points in between and kind of the different fundamentals that make up this incredible kind of style of music. So thanks for being here. Without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and I might pop back in with some questions and some thoughts. And
Sure.
go ahead, Bala.
Thank you, Aaron, and thanks BRM for inviting me to do this. It's always fun to, pardon me, work with musicians on projects, and especially under the current situation when we are all stuck at home. This is one way to interact. So it's fantastic. So I have to confess, I typically do this in a more interactive format, either live or even through other media, but I'm able to sort of ask and get responses and vice versa. So here I know you're just watching, but feel free to, and I would encourage you to send in comments and questions. We'll watch out for them. Aaron's going to be here as well, watching out, and he can always stop me and ask me questions. So feel free to ask while the topic's still being covered, rather than necessarily waiting till the end, because when we get to the end, you may not necessarily recall what is that you wanted to ask. So feel free to do that.
And just to be clear, on the ViewSee page on the website where you're watching the stream, right below, there's a whole comment section, and you can hit comment there. And also there is a donation button, which will go directly to this series and to the musicians and artists that are putting these together. So I would request, please do feel generous, and show your support. So thanks for that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Aaron. So we're gonna sort of spend maybe we're gonna spend the next 4 Thursdays talking about Carnatic rhythm. And as most of you know, this is with any music and any classical tradition, it's it takes a long time to grasp a lot of the nuances and so on. So, but at the same time, I want to be able to cover as much as possible over the next 4 days. And again, I think your comments are welcome in terms of whether it's too slow, too fast, and so on, because I don't really know the audience that well enough. So let's kind of contemplate, first of all, what is Carnatic rhythm? The term itself is not necessarily something that's been in use all that much, because when you're in a particular music, you don't call it a rhythm from that music, if you see what I mean. So Carnatic rhythm is more of a modern way of looking at something that's been around for, like, what I take for granted, but to be able to explain it. So let me talk about Carnatic music itself. So Carnatic music is predominantly from the southern part of India. And so most of you are familiar with Hindustani music. So you have Hindustani music and Carnatic music. And the rhythm that's part of Carnatic music is something that's, it's when you sort of get into it, you say, oh, wow, it's a little complex. And it's not necessarily easy to sort of grasp right away. There's a lot of complexities, but once you kind of spend a little bit of time, it actually becomes much simpler. So hopefully I'll be able to sort of give a little, at least a few pointers that you're able to sort of understand what's going on in that context. Some of the terms, so I think you might have, I actually did send over a glossary of terms and so on. I try not to use too much sort of a musical terminology if you're not familiar. So I'll try and use more generic terms, but some of the terms, it's good to know, right? So the first term that I'm going to start with is something called Talam. Talam is a word that sort of you hear in different contexts. So in the southern part of India, it's called Talam because it's very much the language is Tamil. So the word is sort of it's a Tamil word, but the word actually came from, well, I don't want to get into that too much, but there's a equivalent term which, so you would have heard Tal or Tala and Talam. They're all the same thing. It's just in different geographical regions, people might modify the word a little bit. So what exactly is a Talam? A Talam is basically a cycle. The concept is that you have a sense of rhythm, but there is also a cycle that repeats. So if you think about a song, you have a verse, but you have this one line that repeats. So Talam is that cycle where we actually fit the song into. And Talam is actually an explicit action in Carnatic music. In other words, there is always someone who is sitting there putting the Talam, meaning showing where the cycle is, where the bars are and things like that. And so if you're not if you're new to Carnatic music, this is something that might strike you as sort of an odd thing to do, for someone to actually sit there and be clapping all the time. And so you might be wondering, why are these people clapping, and what's with sort of counting fingers and so on. And there's a good reason for that. The reason is that often in a musical setting, or even a dance setting, all the participants are working within that concept, but no one's necessarily giving that that beat, if you like. So let's take, for example, like a drummer who's giving the beat so that somebody can actually play on top of that drummer. Here, everyone sort of rhythmically they can get very syncopated and very complex. So, which means that you have to have some sort of a conductor in the middle to make sure everyone is staying within that pocket. And that is the function of the person who's putting the talam. In a music concert setting, it's the vocalist who does the talam. So you would actually, if you go and see a vocal concert, you would find the vocalist sitting there, and they're usually clapping and counting all the time while they're singing the song. Of course, there are times they don't do it, because that's a time they're actually improvising, and it's free form. It's not rhythmic. So if it's rhythmic, they would do that. And often you would see them clapping on their thigh, and it's just very common. If you go to a dance concert, you would see someone sitting on the side, pretty much doing the same thing. Okay, so let's maybe get into talam itself a little more. So there are many talams, meaning that there are many different types of cycles. The most common one is, no surprise to anyone, it's a cycle with 8 bars, and the name of this talam is called Adi Talam. And the reason I'm mentioning this word is that Adi Talam is so common, it probably accounts for something like, I would say 50–60% of all the compositions in Carnatic music, maybe even more. So again, as I said, it's an 8-bar talam, and so the way it's expressed. Yes, Adam.
Sorry, I was just gonna say that it's more like maybe like 8 beats, because like a bar might include 4 beats. Sometimes we could think of Adi Talam as 2 bars of 4 beats, 8 beats.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes I think that for West.
Yeah, maybe I might be sort of, so it's a terminology which, so it's an 8-beat talam. So the times it can be 16 beats as well, but that's just basically you're kind of doubling everything. So for us, whether it's 8 or whether it's 16, for us it's the same thing. It's just a slower paced Adi talam. Now so each one of these, we call it akshara. So basically, instead of 8 beats, we would say 8 aksharas, right? And each one of these beats, it can have subdivisions. And so again, very common in all musical traditions, each one is it's got 4 subdivisions. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now I just want to kind of mention that the most common talams are mainly 4. They probably account for about, I would say, 90–95% of all the compositions. So besides Adi Talam, there is another one that's basically 3 beats. So we just basically clap twice, turn. So that's one cycle. So you would just keep repeating like this: 3, 1, 2, 3. Again, with potentially 4 subdivisions: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 2 more talams that are a little odd in the sense that they have the subdivisions are not equal. So for example, like here we said 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that, and Rupakatalam 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. These talams are called chapu talams. And I will get into more about chapu talams in the next session, but I kind of want to mention them today. The interesting thing about the chapu talams, and they actually came from folk music into Carnatic tradition, which is a classical tradition. But they become so important that now they are sort of two of the most important talams in our tradition. So the first one is called Misra Chapu. And again, I'm sorry for using a terminology, but you're going to come back to it again. So Misra means 7 in Carnatic tradition. So the Misra Chapu means it has 7 beats. Well, how do you get the 7 beats is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you do a 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4. And you can see that not every beat has the same number of subdivisions. So it doesn't. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Or 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And then the fourth one is basically a Khanda Chapu, which is Khanda means 5. And this one we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, not equal number of subdivisions. Or you would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that becomes 10. So now you're probably wondering why I'm saying 5 and then 10 and then 7 and then 14, because for us, they're the same thing. It's basically you're just doubling the speed, and therefore 7 is same as 14 and 14 is same as 28 and so on. So that's a little bit of background in terms of Talaams. So as I said, Talaams are, what sort of keep everyone together. So when you go to so let's come back to the kind of a concert type setting, right? So you go and you go to a concert. Well, what's happening there? There might be a beginning which might be just improvised. So basically, there's no rhythm at all. So if there's no rhythm, you won't see the drummer playing. Okay, so in Carnatic tradition, let me just maybe describe the Carnatic concert setting. If you haven't been to one, you have to have minimum 3 musicians on the stage. You don't have to, but that's usually the setting if it's a vocal concert. So you would have a vocalist, you would have a violinist like Arun, and then you would have a mridangist who's playing the drums. And so and in a Carnatic concert, you potentially could have anywhere from 5 to 10 compositions that will be performed. So that's a little different to sort of Hindustani setting where the number of compositions the number is smaller and it takes a long time to develop that composition. In Carnatic music, it's actually shorter and you tend to have more. Each composition would be based on in its different talam, so a different cycle. But once you start the composition, that particular structure cannot change, and the pace cannot change, strictly speaking. So whatever talam that I start singing, it would stay, and then I would do this till the composition's completely over. Even within the composition, I might be compromised. I might be improvising. But even when I'm improvising, I'm still doing it within that cycle. So the cycle is important. So right now, what I'm doing is this is the Adi Talam. So I'd be doing this, and I'm talking right now, but I'm still doing this, and it'll continue till the composition's over. And sometimes that you would have some sort of a trading that's happening between the vocalist and the violinist and within the composition. And even there, it's the vocalist keeps on putting talam, and the violinist would have to play on top of the talam. So when you are accompanying a vocalist, it's important for you to know what the talam is, and be familiar and be comfortable with the talam, because you're not in control. The vocalist is in control, and you have to be able to play within that pocket, even when you're improvising. And same thing goes for the drummer. The drummer is sitting there and they're playing, and they're helping in a way to make sure that the pace is maintained, and so on and so forth. And then when sometimes the drummer is playing a solo in a main composition, they have to play the solo within the same pace and the same structure of the talam. So a lot of times that when you go to a concert as a drummer, you have no idea when you're going to be asked to play the tani. Tani means the solo. Sometimes they might talk about it beforehand, but a lot of times a vocalist would not even say, I'm going to sing this composition and I'm going to ask you to play a solo in that composition. It's usually a surprise at that moment. Yes, Aaron?
Yeah. So is it safe to say that the mridangist has free reign to play as they wish, or do they have something that they follow? Even if they're, for example, playing for a song like Vatapi Ganapatim, which is a very popular song, is there a set way that they're supposed to accompany a vocalist, or is it completely free? And how might that change based on the concert or the musicians on stage?
I mean, you have a certain amount of freedom in the way in which you're accompanying a particular composition, but there's some unwritten rules, and you can always. I mean, a drummer couldn't potentially know every single composition. Like the one that you mentioned, Vatapi, is very common. So almost every drummer who goes to the stage would know that composition, right? So they can play. But there are times that, a composition might be brand new to them. They never heard it before, but they still kind of quickly adapt to that situation, because that comes from your training. Your training is mostly about adapting to a situation on the stage at that moment. It's all instantaneous. Having said that, there is a conventional way of playing for certain compositions. So, for example, a certain type of composition, Vernam, which is again very, very common. There is a type of composition and usually sung at the beginning of a concert. People would say that, and the Vernam's usually sung in multiple speeds, but at least 2 speeds. So there's a lower speed and the higher speed, so you double. So there is most drummers would say, well, the vocalist singing in the lower speed, you're not supposed to play in the double speed, but some do play. But so there are some conventions that are sort of understood, right? So, I mean, a simplest Vernam is, I don't have any pitch or whatever, but so the drummer was that. That's the pace you play. But you could play whereas this vocalist like so it feels a little awkward when the drummer is playing at a double speed. So but those are sort of unwritten rules. No one ever tells you, no, you cannot do that. But yeah.
That's where musicality comes in. Musicality, right? That's where like your choices as far as how you think, what aesthetics, what you think sounds good.
Absolutely.
Somebody else thinks sounds good. You can be free with that. That's good.
Absolutely. So it's all about interpretation and so on and so forth. And some fantastic musicians would actually get away with that type of break in the conventions and still sound great, but but not necessarily everyone can manage it. So maybe with that, I can maybe get into a little more. I think I promise I get into a little bit of konnakkol as well, and I think the people who came on at 8 o'clock would have heard a little bit of konnakkol. What is konnakkol? Well, konnakkol is basically vocalizing the rhythm that you play. So people would call it vocal rhythm. Why is konnakkol very common in Carnatic music is that as a drummer, when you learn to play the drums, you also have to vocalize it as you're learning. So basically you're learning two things at the same time. And so, a good example is your first day at this rhythm school would involve two things. The first thing they might teach you how to play the drums and then they might teach you how to say it or vice versa, but both are likely to happen on that first day. So on the first day, you learn 4 notes. You learn ta, di, tom, nam. So every mridangist would basically start with those 4 notes. Ta, di, tom, nam. And simply you take the drum and you play on the left side ta, right side di, left side again tom, right side nam. So 4 notes, right? And then you're taught how to say them. And you're also taught how to say them within the context of the talam or the rhythmic cycle that I was talking about. So if you recall, it was a 8-beat talam, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's one cycle, right? So you would say ta, di, tom, nam, ta, di, tom, nam. You actually have to say it twice because ta, di, tom, nam is only 4 notes. You have 8 beats, so you say it twice. That's basically your first lesson as a mridangist. And then they would say, okay, now you have to say the double speed. Ta, di, tom, nam, ta, di, tom, nam, ta, di, tom, nam, ta, di, tom, nam. And then you have to say next speed. Tati tom nam, 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 ta. And so step by step, as you learn more, you're always saying it. So that art of saying, and especially art of saying with the talam, that sort of became almost like an instrument. So that's what we call konnakkol. Now you come across konnakkol in a concert setting, but it's very rare. But it's been there in the past, where there's actually someone sitting there and vocalizing rhythm along with other musicians, but it's not as common. It's more, I wouldn't say common, it's almost necessary in a dance concept. So when you have a dance performance, the musicians actually sit to the side, to usually the stage right, and there is someone called Nattvanar. And what they're doing is, they're basically saying konnakkol. They use a different term, they call it Nattavangam, but that's what they're doing. They're vocalizing the rhythm. And the dancer is primarily listening to that person. Everything else is secondary. I mean, obviously they need to emote, so they're listening to the song, they're listening to the violin, they're listening to the mridangam, but the person who's driving that process is person who's actually saying the rhythmic syllables. But a lot of people are fascinated by it, and as you heard at the beginning, it's in the group Akshara, I do a lot of konnakkol because I think it's very interesting to hear the vocal rhythm. I mean, I can sort of get into a little more. So this is something that if you guys want to try it out at home, you can do it. So, do you have a question?
Can I ask a question real quick?
Oh, no, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the question is, first, each one of the syllables that you're speaking,
Yeah.
those are tied to actual strokes on the drum. Are they all tied to a stroke on the drum?
No.
They're not all. Some of them are, some of them aren't.
Some of them are. I think basically what happened was that, so the notes that are, the notes I was talking about earlier on, tati, tom, nam, it's, that's hardly ever used in the konnakkol context. The reason is that, I mean, if you're new to this whole art form, basically everything's going to be a little awkward and a bit of a tongue twister anyway, but tati tomnam doesn't flow out as smooth. Especially if you want to say tati tomnam, tati tomnam, tati tomnam, tati tomnam, it just doesn't come out smoothly, right? So although those are the first four notes you learn, in a more advanced konokol, like the real konokol setting, we hardly ever use it. So maybe the most common four syllable phrase is takadimi. So takadimi is a lot of people have heard. In fact, you kind of hear this in different contexts and wherever people talk about, oh, takadimi ta, takadimi te. But takadimi itself is not linked to particular strokes on the Mridangam. So it kind of independently also started to grow a little bit, if you see what I mean. So you have the Mridangist doing the strokes and calling it something, and then when you vocalize it, you don't call it exactly the same thing, only because it doesn't flow naturally. So there's some, you say takadimi. Another word is takajanu. Now takajanu is attached to certain phrases. So I don't have a, well, I do have a Mridangam, but it's tough to play the way I'm sitting right now, but this is a Kanjira. So in Kanjira, you go, so that is takajanu, takajanu, taka. So you would call it takajanu. So there are strokes that, there are certain phrases that you can sort of say, oh yeah, that's how you play it. But takadimi, you cannot really play it. It's just a phrase. Yeah. And so you can see how it kind of develops. Right now we are kind of in the four syllable phrases, takadimi, takajene, takadimi, takajene, takadimi, takajene, takadimi, takajene. So let's just maybe take a step back and think about, okay, what are some of the common single syllable phrases? So ta, di, tom, those are the ones that I mentioned before, ki, da, and so on. And then if you want to have two syllable phrases, ta ka, ki da, di mi, janu. Those are very common. And then when it comes to three, takita, tadimi, januta, dimita, those are very common, and then so on. And then a very common syllable, a phrase is a 5-syllable phrase called tadinki natom. Why do I mention it? So the reason I'm mentioning tadinki natom is that it is almost, you cannot really have a complex phrase without it. Tadinginadam is there almost all the time. And so it's a very common phrase that we use all the time. So in the next few sessions, I'm going to get into a little more about how these complex structures are put together, and basically I'm going to take them apart, put them back on, so that you get a sense for the grammar and why that these go together and so on. Because there are certain there's certain grammar in this language, and once you kind of understood the grammar, the appreciation of the structures are heightened, because you're able to kind of, oh yeah, now I understand, rather than the whole thing being a sort of a you know, a little too complex to kind of figure out. I enjoy it, but I'm not really getting, and I'm not really getting it. I'm not able to understand what's going on. And so once you're able to break it up, once you understand the grammar, it really helps. I don't know if there are anyone responding, any questions coming through?
We haven't seen many questions. One person did ask about the glossary, that you had mentioned that you had a glossary of terms.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know how we shared that or if we did, but maybe we can share it with the folks who are viewing tonight. So maybe that's something we can take care of offline. If Bala, you send that to me, I can always pass it on to people after this workshop.
Okay.
Yeah, we could send it over after, but I think that would be also helpful just for people to have something to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, basically what I did there, I have it in front of me. I kind of explained some of the common vocabulary. So what is a talam? What is a akshara? And some of the things I mentioned, so that you can always go back and take a look. Yeah, so we can maybe share it after the session. So maybe what I can do now is get into developing some basic rhythm. And this usually is more of an interactive session where I would say it and then people would try it and so on. So I'm just going to explain how how we develop a different how we sort of manage to put together different phrases into Adi Talam. So I'm going to stick with the 8-beat Adi Talam. So of course, the putting 4 syllables into each, or 4 subdivisions into each beat it's pretty simple, right? So you can say taka dimmi taka jenne taka dimmi taka jenne taka dimmi taka jenne taka dimmi taka jenne. So if you then say, okay, what is that total number? So it's basically you're putting 4 into each, and there are 8 beats, so it adds up to 32. Okay, so that's kind of the math. So each cycle contains 32 subdivisions, and that's how we think about it. So the math is sort of useful once you start to put together, somewhat complex structures, because they have to add up correctly to that number of subdivisions. Now, so the first test is really, when I teach, beginners, and the first time they kind of get into some sort of a syncopation is when they're saying a 3-syllable phrase like takita into Adi Talam, because the subdivisions are still 4, but you're saying 3. Okay. Now, if you're just only putting 1 note per beat, it's not that bad. You go ta ki da 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 ta ki da. Okay, I mean, you have to say it a bunch of times for it to come back to the beginning, to the 1 again. That's because, remember, it's 8 beats, and then now you're saying 3, so it takes 3 cycles before you come back to 1 again. But saying it is not that difficult. But now if you say the next beat, meaning that you put 2 syllables into each beat, takita, 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 ta. Okay, so there now you're starting to sort of divide some of these beats into half. Takita, 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 takita. Now if you double that again, now you're into 4 subdivisions and you're putting 3 syllable phrase into that. Takita, 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 takita. Takita, 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 takita. Okay, so that's usually I find a very good exercise to kind of sort of push that 3 into 4, because that then sort of sets you up into saying more complex things. So that's usually the first step that we do.
Can I help clarify just something? That first, when he was showing the subdivision of 2. So the subdivision of 2 would sound like da ga da ga da ga 1 2, right? This is what it would be, and then
Yeah.
he was doing 3s in groups of 3 there, right? So it's
Yeah.
1 2 3 1 2 3 da ki da da ki da da ki da. So he's saying if you clap, keep this pulse the same, and then do 3s when we're doing this 2 subdivision. And then the next thing, Bala, you did was you did a 4 subdivision. So each clap was getting 4 beats. 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3, right? That's the tempo of it. But then you were doing again groupings of 3.
Correct.
1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2, right? So that's the exercise, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
just
So
wanna-
I actually find that that's actually a very good exercise. A lot of times, when I'm teaching beginners, and even when I'm teaching dancers, because a lot of times, you run into some you run into an issue like with a rhythmic phrase, and if you break it up, often the thing that's tripping you up is the 3 that's going into 4. Funny enough, I wouldn't say all the time, but a lot of times, you find that those are the things that actually, for example, if you go taka dimmi, 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 taka dimmi. Now throw a 3 in there and see what happens. Takita taka dimmi, 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 taka dimmi. So as soon as you put a 3 into it, everything is shifted, and and that right away it creates that tension, right? And the thing that creates sometimes even more tension is actually space. Okay, so space is something that, especially if it's 3, can create a lot of tension, right?
Right.
It's like even what you were saying, Aaron, before. You were saying 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, and then groups of 3. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. Now instead of saying 1 2 3, just say 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1. So you just take out the 2 and 3, and all of a sudden the complexity, you would think that it's the same thing, but it's not. It's actually, it becomes much more.
Right. I mean, all you're doing is instead of saying 1 2 3, you're just saying 1. You're still holding it for 3 counts.
Correct. Correct.
1 1 but everything else is in your head. You're not saying it, so you're not actually verbalizing it, which means
Correct.
space. And the challenge here, right, is so much about keeping dala.
Yeah.
Keeping the pulse steady is
Correct.
sometimes the hardest thing.
Right.
I mean, if I didn't have to keep dala, if I could
Oh, you're
just
fine. Yeah.
I could say takita takita takita. I can do this, or takita takadimi takit. So I did all 4s, but 1 3, like Bala was saying. How you do that, and it's like throwing a monkey wrench into it, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden everything is off by 1.
Yeah.
You have to hold down your pulse, and that's the challenge, and why these are such great exercises, I think, for control of time. Can you show that one more time, where you just did the 3 and then everything else was a 4, and it was like takita takadimita kadimita kadimita, right? Can you show that one more time? I think
Yeah, sure. So, you just first you say takadimi just to settle into it. Say takadimi, 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 takadimi. Takita takadimi, 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 takita, takita, takadimi, takadimi. So there, what I did was I pushed it, I threw a 3 in there, but at the end, I also threw a 5 to bring it back to 1 again. So because the 5 at the end neutralizes the 3 at the beginning, because 3 plus 5 is 8, right? Takita, takadimi, 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 takita, takita, takita. Now let's try reversing it, because 5 also creates an issue. Takita, takadim, 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 takadim. So that also creates a tension. It's a reverse.
And there you would put a 3 at the end to make it land. So that way, when the comes back around, you can start again, right? That's why you were changing what you did at the very end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this might be, child's play to some, and for some, it's kind of creates a little bit of tension. So what I usually tell people is, listen, if you find this challenging, it's fine. Everyone has different strengths. You just, something is an issue that a situation you walk into, you go, takita, takadimi, takadimi. And if you end up saying takita, takadimi, 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 you know that you're kind of going off. This is actually a good exercise to kind of develop that strength. And like you said, Arun, it's not about saying takita, takadimi, takadimi, takadimi. That's not it. It's actually saying it with the talam, right? Because then you know that when you're able to sort of, slice it, dice it any way you want, then you know you can put all sorts of things in there and still kind of get that feel for that pocket, right? So, so that's usually a pretty good exercise. And so coming back to the space, as I said, that's actually makes things worse, because if you say, as I said, takit, if you say takita, 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 takita is one thing. Da, 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 da. So instead of takita, I'm saying da, and then I'm just removing the kita. And that is more difficult than saying, just filling. So because, space, as we, most musicians would know, that creates tension, right? And how long do you hold it for? Now, for example, if you wanted to say 5, taka takita, 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 and I can just keep going on like that. Or I can just hold it for 5. Da, 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 da. Okay. And you can keep going. This is 7. Takadimi, takita, takadimi, takita, takadimi, takita, takadimi, takita, takadimi, takita, takadimi, takita. Or da, 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 da. So, these are very interesting problems to have.
Yeah. And it's just a way of phrasing the same thing. So theoretically, it's the same thing. 7 is 7. Mm-hmm. But you can play out all the 7 micro beats. Mm-hmm. You can just do the first one and hold the rest of them. So it's just a hit, but it still counts as 7. And you can also phrase them in different ways, right? You can do a 3 and a 4. Or a 2, 2, and a 3. Yeah. Or, like I'm 2, 3, 2. All these are other possibilities of phrasing the same idea of 7, or whatever number you want to work with. There's so many different ways that you can actually phrase it.
Right, exactly. So maybe here, I'm thinking that maybe I can go a little deeper.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If from the VC page, this question says the phrase "dalinku taka diku taka dadingenathom" is everywhere in Bharatanatyam. What is the meaning of it?
So Talanga is it's not really it doesn't really have any meaning. What it is, it's a basically almost like saying 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's
That's
perfect
it.
explanation. That is the perfect. That is exactly what it is. I think.
That's it. You're setting everyone up for what's coming. So this is just a basically you just it's a set it's a, you just set it up.
Yep.
So so they're so that's a talang is usually what we use in Adi Talam. Now if you wanted to set it up in Tishram means 3. Let's say there is something that's coming up in triplets. Is another setup. So that way everyone knows, oh, now I have to be in 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
But that's a good question though.
Yeah. So you mentioned you were going to go deeper into some particular topic.
Yeah, so I was thinking that maybe I can introduce the kind of idea of I mean, I'm actually jumping ahead to a completely different session, but maybe at least introduce a concept of what we call a Korvai. So Korvai, the term, that's actually a Tamil word, means that, it's like putting a garland together. You basically putting together, you're adding things one after the other to create something that's beautiful. Okay. So how you put certain pieces together. I mean, in the modern world, you would probably call it Lego system or something, but it's the same sort of concept. Your son would know that. Right. So what is the idea of a Korvai? Because it comes in different forms and different context. So maybe again we go back to the concert, either a musical concert or a dance concert, because I think depending on the audience, you might be experiencing different things. So it's nice to kind of put that in context, right? So in a musical context, what is a Korvai? Well, and let's assume again you have the vocalist and you have the violinist and the Mridangam, sort of a vocal concert, right? Which is the most common form of a music concert. The vocalist is sort of halfway through their concert, and they would end up singing something called a main, which is basically kind of the main item in the concert. And in the main item, what they typically would do is they would do a free improvisation, which is raga or ragam, and then they will get into the composition, and they'll sing through the composition, and then they'll pick a line somewhere where they might improvise that line a little bit, and then they'll start to sing the notes in a kind of a free form, again, improvised form. All the way through, they're still putting this talam, okay? And the idea is to sort of improvise a whole bunch of notes and then come back to the bass line that they're singing to. And this usually starts with singing very small phrases, and then it expands again more and more and more. And eventually they'll get to some sort of a more complex Korvai. So that's the Korvai. And so that's what the vocalist does. I can get into the grammar and the structure and all that probably in a different session, but I just want to kind of introduce the concept to you. And then, as I was saying earlier on, usually the mridangist would also play a solo during that piece, at the end of that piece. So during the solo, they'll also introduce the concept of Korvai, which is the complex phrases that we come across in Carnatic music, where people are like, okay, what's going on here? Can you explain this to me? And in a solo, there's actually quite a few, not just one. They would end up playing a number, and then they'll play like a major one at the end, and then they'll complete it. In a dance in a dance concept, it's usually in a piece called Varnam, where they actually end up doing something close to a Korvai, very similar, where again it's a complex structure that would take up a number of cycles. So it's not just usually one cycle, it's like multiple number of cycles. So it's like, 3, 4, whatever cycles. Why is this important? Because this is where the complexity of the rhythm really comes through most times. And this is where the grammar helps, because so what's happening here, a lot of times you would hear something being played 3 times. So there's the grammar, there are rules behind, what, how do you, how many times do you play a certain structure? How do you build a structure? How do you complete the structure, and all that? So that term is something that that we'll revisit at a later stage. I'm just looking at the time, and I don't know if I should leave it there. Do you have any questions?
Look through to see if we have any questions. Yeah, we don't seem to have too many questions here. That must mean everyone totally's got it. They know exactly. They're professional Carnatic percussionists. Yeah, no, I think that was really great. You know what would be great is maybe some konokol. Maybe you could take us through. Maybe how about this? It would be great to hear you just tell us a little bit about a corvée. Like, just think of a simple corvée. Tell us what it is, and then do a little konokol solo. So the spoken rhythm solo over Adi Talam, and then do the corvée. So then we can be like, oh, there it is. That's the corvée. Something like that. Would that be?
Yeah, sure. So so Korvai is something that usually has so 2 parts to it. Again, not every time, but there's sort of fairly common features. So there's a kind of a build up, and then there is there's end part. So if you recall, a phrase I said is very common, which is tadinki natom, that usually comes in the second part. And it can take so many different forms. But the simplest form is just tadinki natom, right?
1, 2, 3.
Say it again.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, correct. And typically you repeat it 3 times, okay? So again, so you have some sort of build up, and then you have some sort of release. So now here's a corvée which is, it's been around for a very long time. I don't even know if it comes from necessarily a particular school, because it's been around for a while. Did you want me to say it, or do you want me to explain?
Yeah. Maybe you could just show us the corvée first, and then you could do a solo, and it could come out of that solo.
Okay.
Right there.
So a simple corvée is dam, tati dam, ditta dam, tati kita tum dam, tati kita tum dam, tati kita tum dit dam, tati dam, ditta dam, tati kita tum dam, tati kita tum, tati kita tum dit dam, tati dam, ditta dam, tati kita tum dam, tati kita tum dam, tati kita tum dam. Okay, so, oh. Was I guess I was getting a call.
That can incorporate that.
I
bet we could.
Okay, so the first part of it is dit dam, tati dam, ditta dam, right? The second part is tadinki natum tam, tadinki natum tam, tadinki natum tam. Okay. I mean, I can get into quite a bit of detail in terms of what, you know, what is allowed and what is not allowed, how do these things put together and so on and so forth. But
we could save that for next week.
Yeah, I'll save that for next week. But I'll play it so that you kind of know how it sounds as well. So. So this is, again, I played the entire phrase 3 times. That's also very common as well. So when you play a Korvai, typically you play that Korvai 3 times. You can modify it each time a little bit, but mostly it's untouched and you repeat it. So that's another thing that happens in this tradition, is that you find a lot of things getting repeated 3 times. You know, so you know, it's as I said, you know, over time that you kind of start to identify certain patterns, and then you sort of say, okay, why do you do it that way? And then you kind of understand certain grammar and so on, and over time, so you know, you learn to appreciate what's happening, some of the nuances a little better.
Great. Yeah. Well, thank you, Bala, very much for this really great introduction to Carnatic rhythm.
Sure.
And, you know, we're going to be back next week talking about some different concepts and going a little deeper into some of these things. If you have any questions for Bala, you can write them in on the VUC page that we're on right now, that you're watching on below, or you can also email them to info@brooklynragamassive.com, and we'll get them over there, and then we can try to address them next week in this workshop. So maybe, Bala, can you take us out with a Konokol solo, and then a little bit, maybe that Korvais. Throw that Korvais in there at the end.
Okay. Tatakadin, takatakadin, kartakadin, targadakadin, takadin, tatim, tintakadin, tatim, tintakadin, tatim, tintakadin, tatim, tintakadin, mitatim, tintakadin, tatim, tintakadin, tintakadin,
Great. Beautiful, Bala. Thank you. You know, there is one more question. Somebody asked about what's a good document or book for practicing Konokol. And do you know of any books that are good at explaining this?
Actually, someone asked me at another session, and I didn't know, I wasn't aware of it. I'm still not. I haven't really come across anything personally. I'm sure there's something out there, but this is usually this is a very oral tradition. So I mean, you do find a lot of books on um, compositions and things like that, but on konnakkol, I personally haven't come across anything.
Yeah. Neil, who's behind the scenes, says maybe you should write it. The Konokol book.
Yeah, with BRM.
Yeah, I hear you about the vocal tradition. That it tends to be the case that there are some books for ragas and compositions, and but even those, while you have the notation written out, so you can learn the song, none of the ornaments can really be written. So even that, you can have a book, but then to hear the music and to hear somebody and how they actually are performing those notes kind of has to happen with the teacher to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, it's also partly because I think it hasn't been really codified, and I mean, one of the things that I do, like with my school and with my students, I do have a systematic way of writing things down, and all the grammar is there. So there's like how do you, what's the space and all that kind of stuff. So um, so they so we do, there's a systematic way of doing it. I just haven't published anything for the public, but it's entirely possible. I mean, you're right. I think, I mean, some of the ornamentation, like, especially when it comes to Carnatic music itself, how do you explain Bhairavi to someone who's never taught how to play Bhairavi, right? So, but whereas I think, if we say, Takadimi or Tarikida, those things can be written down, and then they can be explained in terms of how it fits into this pocket and things like that. So that is there. It just, I don't think it's been, I think people have published books on Mridangam itself, but not necessarily on, at least I haven't come across it.
Konokol specifically, yeah. Maybe that's a need out there. But Bala is also a wonderful teacher. And are you teaching online? Are you? I mean, outside of like workshops like this, are you doing private teaching and things?
Yeah, I am. I mean, you know, um, it's not the same as sort of face to face, but I am teaching online, and I actually have I've actually blended my Mridangam like with my senior students, Mridangam and Konokol. So there are actually two students who learn only Konokol, but they come to the same class, and so it's actually very interactive. It's very interesting. So everyone's sort of benefiting from that process. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So just Konokol students.
Yeah.
Amazing. Great. Well, I think that may be it for tonight. And thank you again, Bala Skandan, for joining us and for sharing so much great knowledge with us. I'm sure our audience loved it. And, again, please feel free to reach out to us at info@Brooklyn Raga Massive. You can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, and DM us on either of those for any questions or thoughts about the series. And we are coming back on July, every Tuesday and Thursday we're doing these workshops. So coming up on July 7th is Alessandra Belloni, who is an amazing Italian frame drummer, musician, and she is absolutely wonderful. And that's going to happen on July 7th, which is Tuesday. And then Thursday, again, we'll be here with Bala. And maybe just some other, I'm just going to look at a few more because we got some really cool ones coming up. Let's see here. So on July 14th, Jamie Haddad, who is an incredible world-class percussionist who plays, every style imaginable. I had the lucky chance of playing with him recently, and it was awesome. And he is fantastic. He played with Paul Simon. He played with Yo-Yo Ma, Simone Shaheen, to name just a few. But he's going to speak to us about, he actually studied with Kare Kurimani, who's Bala's guru right here. and he went to India and he studied with him and studied Indian percussion, of course. But he is a percussionist playing all kinds of other stuff and was going in for a taste of Carnatic music. So he is going to be on July 14th, which will be a fantastic event. And sorry, I'm just loading up the rest of these because I just want to let you know about a few more. And then July 21st with Parul Shah, who is a Kathak dancer, and she's going to be in talks with a tabla player, and we're going to discuss more about how percussion, rhythm, and dance work together. And that's specifically about Kathak dance, but as Bala has mentioned a few times today, that dance and percussion and rhythm go hand in hand, and the dancer's feet and a mridangist's hands are always connected. So that's going to be an interesting conversation. July 28th, we have a masterclass with Adam Rudolph, who is another just incredible musician and percussionist from studying West African rhythms, Indian music, a lot of different sounds coming out of Adam Rudolph. So that's going to be July 28th. And of course, every Thursday we're here with Bala Skandan. So thanks again, Bala. This was really enlightening, and we look forward to next week. And thanks everyone for joining. If you haven't already, please do consider donating. It helps us put these shows on in this time of quarantine. So it is truly appreciated. And thank you again, everybody, for being here with us tonight.